Section 3 of the Mysterious Forces of Civilization by Abdul-Baha Abbas. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Nicholas James Bridgewater. The Mysterious Forces of Civilization by Abdul-Baha Abbas. Translated by Johanna Dawud. Section 3. Although at that period the power and authority of the popes were such that all the kings of Europe would tremble and grow anxious at their displeasure, and although all matters of importance in Europe were under the control of their right hand and power, nevertheless, as Luther had the right and true opinions in regard to the questions referred to, and adopted the means necessary to make his views prevail, in the period of a little more than 4 centuries which have elapsed since then, most of the people of America, 4/5 of Germany, England, and large numbers in Austria, to be brief, about 125 million of the sects of Christianity have accepted the Protestant faith, and they are still earnestly trying to spread it more and more. Now on the coast of East Africa they have outwardly professed to be endeavoring to emancipate the Sudanese and Negroes, and have established schools among them, and are engaged in teaching and civilizing the savage tribes of Africa, but true inward purpose is to convert the Islamic Negro tribes to Protestantism. Yea, verily, whilst everyone else is busied in enhancing and exalting the renown of his nation, we are still slumbering in our sleep of idle negligence. Consider only this: what great things have been done by Luther and by the enthusiasm of the followers of his faith. Now, if the people of God, who are the manifestations of divine protection and the dawning places of his gifts, would strive earnestly and with wholehearted zeal, trusting in God and wholly weaned from everything except him, and would adopt in their spirit the proper methods of propagating their religion, if they would become alert and active, undoubtedly the light of the visible truth would be shed over all the regions of the globe. But alas! Whereas there are some people who do not know anything of the truth of this, the pulse of the world is not in their hands to feel, and they have no idea what is the great real antidote to the chronic disease of false opinions. They think that the prevalence of a religion is ensured only by the sword, and they try to prove it by the hadith, "I am the prophet by the sword," whilst truly, if they gave due consideration to the subject, they would quickly find out that, at the present time, the sword cannot become an instrument for the spreading of any religion, but, on the contrary, it would be a means of horrifying and frightening the hearts of men. According to the blessed law, it is unlawful to compel the people of the book to accept Islam by force, while it is the lawful duty of every believer in the unity of God to be a guidance to the rest of the world. The hadiths, "I am a prophet by the sword," "I command you to kill the people until they shall confess," "There is no God but God," are uttered concerning ignorant polytheists, who, on account of their extreme barbarism and ignorance, were fallen entirely from the state of humanity. For truly, a belief which is exalted by the stroke of the sword is sure to be most untrustworthy, and soon changes into unbelief and error. Thus it happened with the tribes dwelling around the enlightened city of Medina. Soon after the ascent of the highest Son of Prophethood to the seat of truth, near the all-powerful King, God the Almighty, those tribes returned again to heathenism and became apostates. Consider again the period when the holy breath of the Spirit of God, Jesus Christ, perfumed the land of Palestine, Galilee, the banks of the river Jordan, and the regions round about Jerusalem, when the glorious melodies of the Gospel reached the ears of the spiritually minded. At that time, every nation and people in Asia, Europe, Africa, America, and Oceania, the isles of the ocean, except the Jewish nation, who were believers in the divine unity, were fire worshippers and idolaters, and neglectful of the call of the judgment day. By the mission of the Holy One, the excellent, pure, life-giving breath of eternal truth was bestowed on the dwellers in those parts by the inspiration of God, and the radical basis of the law of Jesus was established, which was, at that time, the medicine and immediate cure for the diseased bodies of humanity. Although in the lifetime of that Holy One there were a few souls who believed in God, but there were really only 12 men who believed. The apostles, among whom was Judas Iscariot, who became an apostate, so that there remained 11 apostles, and some women. However, after the ascension of the Holy One to the horizon of glory, this small number of men and women were chosen by reason of their spiritual ability and holy living, and by the divine power and inspiration of the breath of Christ, for the dignity of guiding to the truth the whole people of the earth. The heathen nations and the Jews of that generation arose with the intention of extinguishing by their power and efforts the divine light which was kindled in the lamp of the land of Jerusalem. As it is written, "They purpose to extinguish the light of God with their mouths, but God has resolved to perfect his light." Although the infidels be averse thereto, and regard it as impossible, so they martyred each one of those holy persons with the most excruciating torments and tortures. Some of them were cut to pieces with knives, others were cast into a fiery furnace to be burnt. Some of the disciples of those holy men were buried alive after being tortured with all manners of racking instrument. In spite of all these grievous tortures, and the widespread popular prejudice and hostility excited against them, they never ceased preaching God's religion, and they did this without drawing the sword from its sheath, or injuring anyone in the slightest. The followers of Jesus Christ have at last spread so widely over the world that in the continents of Europe and America no impression of any other religion has remained, and in Asia, Africa, and in the isles of the ocean there are today a great multitude who have entered into the shadow of the Gospel. These facts are a clear, manifest proof that the dissemination of the divine religion is owing to the perfecting of the individual, to goodness of disposition, to acceptable habits or customs, and deeds proceeding from a spiritual mind. If an individual of good disposition believes in God, he would be accepted in the threshold of unity, for his soul has been purified from all personal taints and the greed of self-interest, and has taken refuge under the protecting care of God. He will be characterized among men by the qualities of trustfulness, truthfulness, temperance, the cherishing of righteousness, zealousness, fidelity, piety, and holiness. Thus will the principal purpose of the revelation of holy, heavenly laws be attained, that is to say, the civilizing of this world, the purifying of the characters of men, and the realization of the happiness of the next world. If it be attempted to attain to these at the point of the sword, men may outwardly become believers, but inwardly they will be deceivers. Here we may tell a story which nobody will read without receiving instruction therefrom. It is written in Arabian history, before the call of the Prophet, on whom be peace, that Naaman ibn Mazar Lakumi, one of the heathen Arab kings, whose throne was in the city of Hira, one day took so much strong drink that he knew not what he was doing, and his intellect was overclouded. In this condition of drunkenness and unconsciousness, he gave orders that Khalid ibn Muzlil and Umar ibn Mas'ud Kalda, two of his favorite and intimate friends, should be put to death. When he recovered from his drunken fit, he inquired after them, and was told what had occurred, that he had commanded them to be killed. He grew burdened with extreme sorrow, and his heart was filled with blood. Note a Persian idiom meaning bursting with grief. End note. And because of the great love and friendship he had had for them, he ordered 2 great buildings to be erected on the site of their graves, and in commemoration of them he set apart 2 days in the year. One was called the Day of Wrath, and the other the Day of Grace, when he would come with great pomp and sit between the 2 buildings. On the Day of Wrath, no one who came within the range of his eye could escape with his life, and he was put to death. On the Day of Grace, however, anyone who arrived or came on a mission to the king would have favors and gifts conferred upon him. This law and custom was strictly observed. One day the king, riding a horse called by name Favorite, started for the country with the object of hunting. Suddenly he sighted an antelope in the distance, and pursuing it, urged on his horse to its fullest speed, until he was separated from the rest of his company and escort. The sun was setting, and he failed to secure his quarry. Turning back in disappointment, he unexpectedly saw a tent afar off, and made up his mind to betake himself there. When he reached the door of the tent, he asked, "Do you seek a guest?" The master of the tent, whose name was Hanzala ibn Abi Ghufra of Ta'i, answered, "Yes," and going forth to meet him, helped him to alight and received him gladly, saying to his wife, "This, as anyone may see, is a noble personage. Prepare a feast, do your utmost in the way of entertainment, get ready the best you have." His wife replied, "We have one ewe, kill it, whilst I bring the little flour I have kept against such an occasion." Then Hanzala milked the ewe, brought a bowl full of milk, and presented it to the guest, after which he killed the sheep and prepared a savory morsel for him. Naaman spent the night in great comfort, through the courtesy, love, and self-denial of his host, Hanzala. When the dawn broke, Naaman thought of his return, and called Hanzala, saying, "You have showed the truest hospitality and the highest courtesy in your entertainment of me. I am Naaman ibn Manza Lakhmi. I shall be pleased to see you and reward your kind hospitality." A long period went by, when a great famine befell the district of Ta'i, and Hanzala was reduced to great extremity. He decided to seek the presence of the king, and by a strange chance appeared before Naaman on the Day of Wrath. The king was extremely distressed and began to reproach him. "Why have you sought the presence of your friend on this Day of Wrath, which is a fatal day. If today my eyes were to fall on my only begotten son Qaboos, he would not escape with his life. Now ask what you will." Hanzalah answered, "I know not about the day of wrath, but earthly things are only for life and the living. And as at this hour it is appointed that I should drink of a fatal cup, of what imaginable use to me can be all the good things of the earth?" Naaman said, "There is no way of reversing the decree." Then Hanzalah pleaded, "Grant me a reprieve, that I may return to my family and make my will, and on the day of wrath next year I will be present again before you." Naaman required a surety from him, so that if he broke his promise, the surety would be put to death in his stead. Hanzalah looked anxiously round, seeking to find someone willing to be surety for him, until his eyes fell upon Sharik ibn Amr ibn Qais Shaybani, who was one of Naaman's servants. He uttered these lines in a stanza: "O Sharik, son of Amr, may I perchance escape from death. O brother of all the afflicted, be not in doubt regarding it. O brother, the Naaman's trust is in thee. It is the day to be surety for the Shaykh, son of Shayban the generous. The grace of the All-Provider makes the way easy." Sharik answered, "O brother, I cannot summon up courage to risk my life." The unfortunate Hanzalah was stupefied and amazed. Then there stood forth a man called Qarad ibn Ajdar Kalbi, offering to become surety on the condition that if he did not deliver up Hanzalah on the day of wrath in the following year, he would himself be ready to endure whatever the king might order to be done to him. So the king made a present of 500 camels to Hanzalah and sent him away. On the day of wrath in the next year, when the true dawn rose from the horizon of the east, Naaman proceeded as usual with great pomp to the two buildings called Gharijan. He took with him Qarad, that he might be executed as the victim of his royal wrath. The courtiers present entreated for a reprieve till the evening, so that Hanzalah might return, whilst the king's purpose was, for the sake of the love he bore him, to save Hanzalah from death by executing his surety. However, he waited till towards the evening, when Qarad was stripped and his neck was about to be severed. Suddenly a horseman was descried afar off, galloping with the utmost speed. Naaman said to the executioner, "What are you tarrying for?" And his ministers rejoined, "Perhaps this horseman may be Hanzalah." When he approached, they saw it was Hanzalah of Ta'i. Naaman was displeased at his coming, and addressed him, "O fool! You that escaped the claws of death, why have you abandoned yourself to them again?" Hanzalah answered, "Know, O king, that faithfulness to my promise has made the deadly poison of death sweet to my taste." And Naaman answered, "What was the cause of thy faithfulness and thy design in keeping thy word?" And Hanzalah replied, "I believe in the divine unity of God, and in the books which came from heaven." Then Naaman inquired of him, "What is the religion to which thou belongest?" And Hanzalah answered, "I am quickened by the breath of Christ, and am walking in the right path, in the way of the Spirit of God, Jesus Christ." And Naaman said to him, "Breathe the holy breath of the Spirit of God into my nostrils." Hanzalah took out the white hand of guidance. Note, Moses, in order to show his power to the Israelites, is said on one occasion to have withdrawn his right hand from his garment. It was white as snow, and the moon was reflected in it brightly. Therefore, to take out the white hand of guidance means to show a miraculous power by which to guide people. See Quran 28:32. From the bosom of God's love, promising the light of the Gospel on the eyes and judgment of those present. When Hanzalah had chanted melodiously some divine verses from the verses of the Gospel, Naaman and all his ministers left their idols and their idolatry and became verily converted to the divine religion and steadfast therein, confessing it was 100,000 pities they had not known until then of such an infinite mercy, and had been so long deprived of this unutterable grace of God. They immediately destroyed the 2 buildings, and repenting of their cruelty and oppression, established straightway the foundations of justice and right judgment. Now, reflect on this wonder, that a peasant, an unknown individual, and apparently a man of naught, because he had the characteristics of the sincere and upright, saved such a zealous king and a great multitude of people with him from the darkness of the evening of errors, leading them to the light of the morning of guidance, saving them from the desert of perdition and idolatry, and bringing them to the coast of the sea of the divine unity. He was the instrument of the abolition of a savage custom which was a disgrace to humanity and destructive of the roots of civilization. There is urgent need of widespread thought and study, and much wisdom and discrimination are required. Alas, my heart swells within me and is full of grief, because it cannot see that the people are devoting their care and energy to what today is worthy of both. The sun of truth is shining over the whole earth, and we still remain afflicted by the darkness of our selfishness. The great ocean is surging about us, and we are scorched, exhausted, and enfeebled by thirst. The divine manna is falling from the heaven of unity, and yet we wander astray and are bewildered how to escape famine. I am silent between speaking and weeping. One of the chief hindrances to the accepting of the divine religion, that is, Bahaism, by the peoples of other religions is the prevailing bigotry and heathenish obstinacy. Consider, for instance, that the divine call to the Prophet was, "Invite men to the path of thy Lord with wisdom and mild exhortation, and discuss with them in the kindest way." Quran. So he was ordered to be humble and gentle to all. Accordingly, that blessed tree of prophecy, Muhammad, of neither the east nor the west, cast the shade of the infinite bounty over the heads of all the people of the world, and went his ways with the greatest benignity of heart and graciousness of manners. Likewise the holy prophets Moses and Aaron, upon both of whom be peace, were commanded when addressing and reproving Pharaoh their master, "Speak to him soft words, haply he may understand and believe." Notwithstanding the fame of the noble prophets and saints, which if they were sincerely imitated would in every respect be a speedy means of bringing perfect goodness into humanity, some persons entirely disregard the example of such good feelings and extraordinary benevolence. They are far removed from understanding the essence of the sacred books of God, and avoid associating with persons of other religions, and they never observe the ancient courtesies of ceremonial usage, and hold it unlawful to do so. With such a lack of intimacy and kindly intercourse, how can it be possible to guide a soul from the mortal darkness of negation, and illumine him with the bright morning of authority? Or to stimulate and encourage a man to ascend from the depths of ignorance and obstinacy to the loftiest horizon of the knowledge of God, and salvation from ignorance? Now let us reflect with the eyes of judgment that if Hanzalah had not behaved with perfect love and sincerity, kindness and hospitality towards Naaman ibn Manzar, he could never possibly have become the instrument of the guidance and adherence of that king and that great multitude of polytheists to faith in the unity of God. Even as avoiding and shunning the company of people and being harsh with them are the sure means of filling them with fear, so are love, kindliness, humility and gentleness the truest method of binding people's souls and attracting their hearts. If one of the believers in monotheism were during his association with a person of another faith to show signs of repulsion, uttering with his lips the terrible words that uncleanness prevented his intercourse with him, verily that foreign person would be so grieved and sad at his words that even if he were to see the splitting of the moon, note a miracle attributed to Muhammad, he would never draw nigh to the truth. The consequence of this attitude will be that if there exist in the heart of the person mentioned some little striving towards God, he will repent of that also, and will flee altogether from the shore of the sea of faith, and seek refuge in the wilderness of indifference and vanity. And when he arrives in his own country, he will put abroad all these things in the newspapers, and otherwise make them public, and declare that the nation in question was lacking extremely in the ordinary qualities of humanity. Now, if inspired by the stars of heaven of unity, we were to meditate a little upon the verses and explanations of the Qur'an and the authoritative books, it would become manifest and proved that a soul which is characterized by the qualities of faith and endowed with spiritual morals shall become a manifestation of the wide mercy of God to all creatures, and shall be an orient of the divine gifts to all peoples. For the sacred qualities of the people of faith are justice, judgment, long-suffering, patience, kindliness, faithfulness, sincerity, fidelity, love, benevolence, zeal, the protection of others, and humanity. So that if an individual were really pure and holy, he would use those means which would attract the hearts of all the nations of the world, and, by the attributes of God, he would draw all the world to the right path, and give them to taste of the Kawthar, note a river in paradise, of eternal life. Nowadays, alas, we have closed our eyes to all such good movements, sacrificing the eternal happiness of mankind to our own temporal interests, and counting heathenish obstinacy as the proper mode by which to secure our supremacy. We are not even satisfied with that, but are even endeavoring to bring contempt and ruin upon one another. When we want to exhibit our knowledge, either of abstruse subjects, or of moderation, or of piety and the fear of God, we commence by reproaching and abusing this one and that one, saying, so-and-so's dogma is founded on false belief, so-and-so's acts leave much to be desired, Zayd's religious worship is too shallow, and Amr's life is weak from the religious standpoint. Somebody's ideas are similar to those of a European. Somebody's private life is inclined to the disreputable. XYZ have not been attending service, and they show no hospitality. 'Tis a pity that during this month the rich merchant did not depart to the everlasting gardens, that is, did not die, and no presents were offered to the threshold of the seat of prophecy, nor any alms for purification. Therefore the basis of our law is destroyed, and there is no more power enduring in faith and piety. The world has fallen into error. Energy is no longer shown to obtain for the clergy its share in the extortions of the governors. It is the end of the world. There are still some proprietors who have been left in possession of that which they had last year. In the town of X there were 80 different judges. Now their number is continually dwindling down, and there only remain 5 for the memory's sake. Each of them had the habit of giving 200 different judgments and contradictory fatwas fatwas, verdicts, in a single day, and now they do exceed 50. A mass of the servants of Allah used to become distracted by it, and now they are at peace. In the past, one day the plaintiff was in the right, on the morrow the defendant. At present this established custom is also abandoned. What a religion of infidels! What an ignorance of idolaters! Unfortunate religion! Unfortunate belief! What a calamity! What a false godliness! What a depth of unbelief! Alas, alas, alas! Where is faith? O brethren in the faith! The time is the time of the end, and the day of judgment is at hand. Note, the day of judgment, the time of the end, are expressions alluding, for a Bahai, to the time when a new dispensation is given to the world. By such words as those I have instanced, the minds of all the weak are confused and disturbed, and the hearts of those in poverty are terrified. Ignorant as they are of the true facts, they do not realize the motives underlying such utterances, and do not know that 100,000 personal objects are hidden under the veil of some person's superstitious words. Therefore they think the speaker has been stirred to his utterance by religious enthusiasm and the fear of God, whereas the speaker discerns his own especial ruin as resulting from the elevation of the masses, and his cries are accordingly. And as he beholds his own blindness when he perceives the good sight of other men, he begins studiously to groan and moan and lament. But a discriminating eye is needed to observe that if such hearts were the veritable manifestations of the fear of God, their fragrant odour would assuredly have perfumed the world, even as doth the musk of the soul. Nothing can be verified in the world except only by word, which needs to be followed by act. If not, these owls are falsely inspired. They have learned only the notes of the white falcons. If the quatta, a bird of the grouse family which flies in large flocks and knows at a great distance where water is to be found, it makes a noise resembling quatta, quatta, whence it receives its name. Should learn the notes of the hoopoe, what becomes of the secret of the hoopoe and of the message of Sheba. The hoopoe was the messenger of the Queen of Sheba to Solomon. The divines, who have extracted from the books of God's revelation the meanings, the understanding and the infinite knowledge of the Deity, those whose hearts are the falling places of the inspirations of divine mystery, ought in very truth to be strenuous in asserting the superiority of God's resplendent people, that is, righteous people, over the others. It behoves them to endeavour to grasp the methods which would probably become the means of the enlightenment of the nation. If any soul disregard such good purposes, surely he will not be accepted in the court of God. He is like one of those who are full of blemishes whilst appearing perfect outwardly. He is poor in the extreme, though he may speak as from the abundance of riches. Thus it is said, if a blind man is idle and prone to anger, know him simply to be a morsel of flesh without eyes. There is a great difference between an authentic man and an imitator of one. The former is David himself, the latter is merely like the tone of his voice. Knowledge and wisdom, purity and faithfulness and freedom of the soul have not been and are not judged by outward appearance and dress. Section 3